What up, though? We've accepted, and you still accept doing lifelong labor for dough, cream, bread, notes, cake, cash, chips, guap, cheddar, chicken, fetty, funds, stacks, racks, M's, a yard, a sawbuck, a fan, a dub, scratch, ducats, skrilla, bank, a stash, funteroys, money, the bag, paper. And the wealthiest persons on earth are wealthy not because they labor to earn paper, but because they actually manufacture the paper that you and I value. You lying every time you say you making money. Let's shake it. The Society for Georgia Archaeology. Jekyll Island's Hidden Past by Ray Crook. People have called the small barrier island, now known as Jekyll Island, home for many centuries, but only the most obvious and recent reminders of that history are usually recognized today. Each year, thousands of visitors are introduced to the splendid cottages and manicured landscapes of the Jekyll Island Club and their connection with the rich and famous industry giants of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Many also see the ruins of tabby structures that stand as silent memorials to English colonization of the Georgia coast during the 18th century and to the later plantation endeavors of the French owners of the island, the Dubignon family. This place was the home of Americans for more than 4,000 years before the first European arrived. The best known historic sites, Horton House and Millionaire's Village, were also the location of major prehistoric sites, indicating that these high ground areas that are easily accessible by water have remained prime real estate for many centuries. Other, mostly smaller prehistoric settlements are located elsewhere on the island, where good access was offered to important food resources. The largest identified Swift Creek settlement was located in the interior of the island and contained an earthen burial mound. Only the barest of details about Jekyll Island's American past are known, and much remains to be learned about this heritage. Buried beneath the feet of visitors to Jekyll Island is a complex. Buried beneath the feet of visitors to Jekyll Island is a complex and multi-dimensional puzzle of archaeological evidence, each piece an irreplaceable clue about the lives of people in the distant past who once called this island their home. Archaeological sites of Jekyll Island are protected under Georgia laws and federal statutes. Jekyll Island, owned by the people of Georgia and managed on their behalf by the Jekyll Island Authority, is a natural and cultural treasure to be both enjoyed and protected. Visitors to our remarkable island should be aware of the past hidden beneath their feet, marvel at its mysteries and untold stories, always act to sustain rather than disturb it, and walk away as advocates for archaeological preservation. The past is present on Jekyll Island, and its legacy's precious. It says Jekyll Island owned by the people of Georgia. This is not true because immediately thereafter, they tell you what you can and what you can't do, or what they expect of you when you visit. Hence, visit meaning you should go home. Don't stay. Visitors to our remarkable island. Who is the our? Remarkable island should be aware of the past hidden beneath their feet. Marvel at its mysteries and untold stories. Always act to sustain rather than disturb it. And walk away as advocates for archaeological preservation, or walk away as advocates for you not being able to come there and enjoy what's yours. Let's shake it. Jekyll Island, Georgia. Island history. Jekyll Island has been a vacation destination for more than 3,500 years. The island's earliest inhabitants were Americans who traveled to Jekyll Island to hunt, fish, and gather shellfish. Try to do that today. When French explorers first arrived in the area in 1562, tens of thousands of Americans are thought to have inhabited present-day coastal Georgia. And I'm pretty sure they also inhabited Jekyll Island. I'm pretty sure they didn't visit the island or travel to the island to hunt, fish, and gather shellfish. Why wouldn't you stay on the island when the weather permitted? British colonists establishing fortifications along the coast and claiming the territory for England. General James Edward Oglethorpe founded the colony of Georgia in 1733. He gave Jekyll Island its present name in honor of Sir Joseph Jekyll, a financial backer of the young colony. With the help of his indentured servants, Major Horton built the island into a relatively prosperous plantation. Indentured servants plantation. No complexion of these people were mentioned. And this is 1792, roughly around that time. With the help of his indentured servant, Major Horton built the island into a relatively prosperous plantation. After his death in 1749, the island went through a series of owners before finally being purchased by Christopher Poulain de Dubignon in 1792. So he says, with the help of his indentured servants, his employees, he built the island into a relatively prosperous plantation. What does plantation mean? It means somewhere where you're planting crops. You're cultivating the land. You're using the soil and all the resources that it brings. Many of you, when you see the word plantation, you immediately get pictures in your mind or electrical signals that give you a picture of shackled neck and wrist and ankles. It wasn't that. The Dubignons enjoyed a successful business raising Sea Island cotton on their plantation for nearly a century. Following the Civil War, Christophe's great-grandson, John Eugene Dubignon, marketed Jekyll Island as the perfect site for a hunting club. Trace your family through records. If you live on coastal Georgia and your family's always been near coastal Georgia and Jekyll Island, trace your family through records. It is a very fulfilling pursuit. And who knows, Jekyll Island or portions of it may have been inhabited by your family. And the soil that they built their dwellings on, and the soil that they fished on and hunted on, This soil, although no one can own earth, no one can truly own soil. This may be connected to your family, and you may be able to go and reclaim it. In 1886, the island was purchased by the Jekyll Island Club, a turn of the century vacation resort patronized by the nation's leading families. Club members included such prominent figures as J.P. Morgan, Joseph Pulitzer of Pulitzer Prize fame, William K. Vanderbilt, Marshall Field of Marshall Field's fame, which was a dope department store in Chicago, until it was turned into a Macy's, and William Rockefeller. In 1904, Munsey's magazine called the Jekyll Island Club the richest, the most exclusive, the most inaccessible club in the world. In 1947, the island was sold to the state of Georgia. Today, the Jekyll Island Authority manages the island for the state of Georgia. In 1947, the island was sold to the state of Georgia. If you notice, they say sold to the state of Georgia, to the estate of Georgia. If it's an estate, it means someone owns it. But oftentimes we get these vague things like the island was sold to the state. What does that mean? Words have meanings. So it was sold to the estate of Georgia. Who owns the estate known as Georgia? I'll leave that to you. (1814 to 1815), British ships attacked Jekyll Island several times, with raids continuing even after the War of 1812 officially ended. Christophe Dubignon later testified, "My house was plundered at 4 different times by said British. When the British departed, 28 enslaved men and women departed with them." Mind you, there is no complexion of the people who they're speaking of. This you have to find out on your own if it's important to you. This is an article called "The Secret Meeting on Jekyll Island: How the Federal Reserve System Was Conceived." In November 1910, a secret meeting took place off the coast of the state of Georgia on an exclusive resort known as Jekyll Island. The island was under private ownership in those days. The state of Georgia has since acquired it. The name of the resort was the Jekyll Island Club, where millionaires, billionaires in today's money, practice leisure activities such as golf, yachting. Leisure activities. They're leaving out some stuff because this was a Jekyll Club, Jekyll Island Club. It was made up of men. So you can imagine that it wasn't just golf and yachting going on there. They're missing a part of the human species. The resort also features what these millionaires like to call cottages, that could more appropriately be called mansions, comprising each of 14 bathrooms, and furthermore, a clubhouse where the secret gathering took place to restore a central bank for America. The men who participated in these meetings were under strict instruction not to discuss anything relating thereto to the press and to deny everything if questions. This might lead you to the question of, well, how are we going to know anything about it since these men were under strict instructions not to discuss anything? This makes me skeptical of anything that I read, anything that follows. It makes me very skeptical because they were instructed to shut up. Nonetheless, The 7 participants in that meeting were, I'm pretty sure it was more than 7, and I'm pretty sure they had their lovely assistants with them. Nelson Wilmarth Aldrich, Abram Piatt Andrew Jr., Frank Arthur Vanderlip Sr., Henry Pomeroy Davison, Charles Dyer Norton, Benjamin Strong Jr., Paul Moritz Warburg. As already mentioned, Senator Nelson Aldrich was a Republican whip in the Senate and was the chairman of the National Monetary Commission, a special committee of Congress created for the purpose of proposing legislation to reform banking. Aldrich was a business associate of J.P. Morgan and a father-in-law to John D. Rockefeller Jr., who was the father of Nelson Aldrich Rockefeller, a former U.S. vice president. Abram Andrew Jr. was a United States representative from Massachusetts. He served as an assistant secretary of the Treasury from 1910 to 1912 and later as a congressman, assistant secretary of Treasury, central banking, treasury, connectedness. Both sides of the coin, still the same coin. Abram Andrew Jr. was a United States representative from Massachusetts. He served as an assistant secretary of the Treasury from 1910 to 1912 and later as a congressman. Frank Vanderlip Sr. was the president of National City Bank of New York, at the time the largest and most powerful bank in all of the United States. Why is a bank? Why does a bank get the designation of being powerful? When you think of a bank, what do you think of? Vaults, fiat currency. How does this make one powerful? Let's move on. Henry Davison was a banker. He was involved in the founding and formation of a big banking consortium called the Bankers Trust Company, and in 1909 became a senior partner at J.P. Morgan and Company. Charles Norton was the president of the First National Bank of New York, which later became part of Citibank. Benjamin Strong Jr. was head of J.P. Morgan's Bankers Trust Company and was also appointed as the first president of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Paul Warburg was a partner in Kuhn, Lieb and Company, as well as representative of the Rothschilds interest. Rothschilds, Red Shield interest. Warburg was one of the wealthiest men in the world and a key architect of the Federal Reserve Act. Warburg was one of the wealthiest men in the world. What makes a man wealthy? Go ahead. What makes a man wealthy? It is estimated that these 3 men represented a quarter of the world's wealth combined. Again, what makes men wealthy? You? Question mark. The Christian Century. Does the promise still hold? Israel and the land. An essay and responses. Gary A. Anderson. The book of Genesis could not be clearer. Israel is God's chosen nation, and the land of Canaan will be its land for all eternity. The book of Genesis could not be clearer. Israel is God's chosen nation, and the land of Canaan will be its land, its meaning Israel's land for all eternity. This suggests that Israel is a group of people, a nation, a group of people. Only a small percentage of very conservative Christians add to this mix the millennial restoration of a kingdom in the land of Israel. Judaism, on the other hand, pins a considerable portion of its eschatological hopes on the return of all Jews to the land of Israel. Only a small percentage of very conservative Christians add to this mix the millennial restoration of a kingdom in the land of Israel. Judaism, on the other hand, pins a considerable portion of its eschatological hopes on the return of all Jews to the land of Israel. This suggests that Israel is a land. The first one we read suggests that Israel is a group of people. This one suggests Israel is a land. Walk with me. Israel's claim to its land is to be distinguished from that of other peoples in another important way. Israel's claim to its Israel's land is to be distinguished from that of other peoples in another important way. This portion suggests Israel is a group of people as well as a land. The promises of Scripture are indeed inviolable, and that Israel's attachment to this land is underwritten by God's providential decree. The miraculous appearance of the Israeli state just after the darkest moment in Jewish history is hard to interpret outside of a theological framework. This article is called, "Why Did God Choose Israel to Be His Chosen People?" Israel, people. This suggests Israel to be a group of people. Deuteronomy 7:7-9 tells us, "The Lord did not set his affection on you and choose you because you were numerous than other peoples, for you were the fewest of all people." This is what the Lord said. The Lord. God chose the nation of Israel to be the people through whom Jesus Christ would be born, the Savior from sin and death. John 3:16. Jesus Christ is the ultimate reason why God chose Israel to be his special people. This is the Balfour Declaration, November 1917, one of the most important statements of British foreign policy of the 20th century. The Balfour Declaration was no more than a short, vague letter that had no legal status. It had not been debated in Parliament, yet it was one of the most significant events leading ultimately to the creation of the State of Israel and conflict between Jews and Arabs. In this letter of November 2nd, 1917, Britain's Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour wrote to Lord Lionel Walter Rothschild. Lord Lionel Walter Rothschild, as a figurehead of the Jewish community in Britain. The letter was later incorporated within the terms of Britain's mandate for Palestine, and so became a legal requirement upon Britain. Foreign Secretary Balfour returned from the United States in April 1917 with the support of President Wilson for a British declaration concerning Palestine. In June, the French Foreign Secretary Jules Cambon also gave his support to Jewish colonization in Palestine. Under this pressure from Weizmann, Balfour invited Lord, pay attention to the word Lord Rothschild, to submit a formula for a declaration supporting a Jewish national home. The first draft of a declaration that was eventually proposed to Balfour by Lord Walter Rothschild in July 1917. Lord Walter Rothschild. What was to happen to the indigenous Arab population? The drafts of the declaration were discussed at 3 meetings of the War Cabinet on September 3rd, October 4th, and October 31st, 1917. During September, Weizmann and Rothschild continued to pressure the government to issue its declaration. The new Amory-Milner draft read, His Majesty's government views with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish race and will use its best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine or the rights and political status enjoyed in any other country by such Jews who are fully contented with their existing nationality. Nevertheless, the October 4th cabinet meeting continued to defer a decision on the declaration because of another plea from Montagu. It was decided to submit the new Amory-Milner draft to President Wilson and to representative Jewish leaders in Britain. The declaration would now only be modified in very minor ways at the final cabinet meeting of October 31st before it was sent to Lord Rothschild, who had been one of its original authors 3 months before. Lord Rothschild. When challenged about the Arab population, Lord Walter Rothschild insisted there was no question that the Jewish national home would ever encroach on the rights of the local majority. In fact, had come up with what they deemed a solution to the Arab problem. The answer was for Britain to run Palestine, and while she kept order, for Jewish immigration to increase to the point that there was a Jewish majority. Britain's chief political officer in Egypt, Gilbert Clayton, had cautioned against any public pronouncement in August 1917, observing that it would not help matters if the Arabs were to be provoked at this time. This is from Investopedia. How the Federal Reserve was formed, Andrew Beatty. The Federal Reserve is widely considered to be one of the most important financial institutions in the world. Its style is a function of the Federal Reserve's Board of Governors. A high rate of bank failures made the U.S. economy a riskier place for international and domestic investors to place their capital. Place their capital, not paper, their capital. The lack of dependable credit stunted growth in many sectors, including agriculture and industry. Americans early on did not want a central bank. They saw this as a model based on the Royal Crown and its Bank of England. America did not want to be made in the image of Britain, and it also favored a more decentralized state-by-state approach to its political economy. Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary of Treasury, was instrumental in the formation of the first national bank in America, known as the Bank of the United States. It was one of four major financial innovations at the time. Including the U.S. government's assumption of the state war debts, the establishment of a mint, and the imposition of a federal excise tax. Hamilton's aim with these measures was to establish financial order, national credit, and resolve the issue of fiat currency. After many decades of lacking a central bank, it was J.P. Morgan who ultimately forced the government into acting on the central banking plans it had been considering off and on for almost a century. Morgan was able to convene all the principal players. Morgan was able to convene all the principal players. Very important. Players. It wasn't just him on his own. There were others like him. Others whose company he enjoyed. At his mansion and command all their capital to flood the system, thus floating the banks that in turn helped to float the businesses until the panic passed. Businesses, banks, hand in hand. The fact that the government owned its economic survival, the fact that the government owed its economic survival to a private banker or bankers forced the necessary legislation to create a central bank and the Federal Reserve. In the years between 1907 and 1913, the top bankers and government officials in the U.S. formed the National Monetary Commission and traveled to Europe to see how the central banking was handled there. In the years between 1907 and 1913, the top bankers and government officials in the U.S. formed the National Monetary Commission. The top bankers. What is a banker? What service does a bank provide? Have you ever asked yourself? What service does a bank provide? Do they even exist without you? I don't mean do they exist without your fiat currency. As I said in my monologue, they manufacture the fiat currency. So why would a bank need you? You place value on their product. Let's shake it. Congress ultimately passed the 1913 Federal Reserve Act. Congress is in bed with bankers. Congress ultimately passed the 1913 Federal Reserve Act, legislation that created the current Federal Reserve System. How beneficial is that to you? What do they give? What service do they provide you? The 1913 Federal Reserve Act, signed into law by President Woodrow Wilson, gave the 12 Federal Reserve banks the ability to print money. The government created the Federal Reserve, but it was by no means under government control. This is the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. The Bureau of Engraving and Printing. I mean, it is definitely a step up from, what's the name of the place that you go and get copies from and all that? Yeah, it's a step up from those places. An official website of the United States government. The BEP, the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, prints billions of dollars, referred to as Federal Reserve notes, each year for delivery to the Federal Reserve System. This is what makes people wealthy. This is what you do anything for. It's a little bit more than, I guess, notebook paper. But imagine if you had the equivalent of $1 million in fiat currency in notebook paper. What would be the difference? The artwork? You put value on this stuff, but what is it? This is what you labor for life for? Unbelievable. Not just you, me too. The Bureau of Engraving and Printing. The Bureau of Engraving and Printing had its foundations in 1862 with workers signing, separating, and trimming sheets of demand notes in the Treasury Building. Gradually, more and more work, including engraving and printing, was entrusted to the organization. In 1877, BEP became the sole producer of all United States currency. United States currency. Understand, United States is the occupying force. United States is the corporation. America is the soil. Today, the Bureau of Engraving and Printing still holds the honor of being the largest producer of government security documents, with production facilities in Washington, D.C. and in Fort Worth, Texas. BEP's history reflects and provides a unique perspective on the development of modern America. These facts have long been recognized by BEP, which is devoted to the preservation and exploration of its own past. These facts have long been recognized by BEP. BEP, the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. They are devoted to the preservation and exploration of their past. I'm a bit confused by that. It's almost like their mission statement. They're devoted to the preservation and exploration of its own past. So their mission statement, they are devoted to the presentation and exploration of the idea that created them. 1690, colonial notes. The Massachusetts Bay Colony, one of the 13 original colonies, issues the first paper money to cover cost of military expeditions. They issue the first paper money to cover cost of military expeditions. Who is accepting this paper money? And why is it valuable to them? The practice of issuing paper notes spread to the other colonies. This is utterly ridiculous. They issued the first paper money. Paper money. It can't be money. Money has a store of value. However, it becomes money when you give it value, when it becomes valuable to you. How did paper become so valuable to us? The practice of issuing paper notes spread to the other colonies. Other colonies, not the other Americans, not the Americans, not the indigenous Americans, not your family necessarily. Because you know what your family was doing? 1690? Yeah, your family was picking, was harvesting some of the things that they grew. They were taking some of their fish, their catfish, and they were taking some other items, and they were going to trade those items with other people for things that they may not have had. 1739, Franklin's unique counterfeit deterrent. Benjamin Franklin's printing firm in Philadelphia print colonial notes with nature prints, unique raised impressions of patterns cast from actual leaves. This process added an innovative and effective counterfeit deterrent to notes, not completely understood until centuries later. This ain't even what they're printing up and what he's trying to give you and you put value to. It's not even collard greens or something like that. It's not even collard greens or turnip greens or mustard greens or something. He coming up with something. He coming up with a little drawing. They're manufacturing little pieces of artwork, little drawings and paintings or whatever you want to call it. 1775. Now people walking around with a bunch of them. And they will do anything for them. 1775. Continental currency. The Continental Congress issues paper currency to finance the Revolutionary War. Paper currency to finance the Revolutionary War? Paper to finance the Revolutionary War? Huh? I'm going to give you this paper for swords? I'm going to get his paper to the blacksmith? Huh? What? What is he going to do with the paper? Burn it? Continental currency was denominated in Spanish milled dollars. Without solid backing and easily counterfeited, the notes quickly lost their value. Right, without solid backing. This is credit. This is pure credit. Because if you're giving someone some paper, you would have had to promise them something else. Hey, hold this until I get back over here. Then I'm going to give you this. 1792, monetary system. The Coinage Act of 1792 creates the U.S. Mint and establishes a federal monetary system, set denominations for coins, and specifies the value of each coin in gold, silver, or copper. And even though gold might excite you, silver might excite you, copper might excite you, they're still just elements. They're still just things from the earth, just like a plant right outside over here. It's a plant. It's something that's in the soil, that's in mountains, that's wherever. Someone tells you it's valuable and you adopt that. Now it's valuable to you. Just because someone else says it's valuable. 1861, greenbacks. The first general circulation of paper money by the federal government occurs. Pressed to finance the Civil War. Again, we have paper financing a war, which, from my understanding, could only mean that weapons were being paid for with paper, which means the people who are making these weapons are getting paid with paper, or they're giving them this paper and promising them something else later. What is the other thing that they're promising them? What does this paper represent? Congress authorizes the U.S. Treasury to issue non-interest-bearing demand notes. Non-interest-bearing demand notes. That's what happens when you have a military. That's what happens when you have a military. You don't have to pay interest. Hence the IRS. Hence your paycheck. All U.S. currency issued since 1861 remains valid and redeemable at full face value. 1865, the United States Secret Service is established as a bureau of the Treasury for the purpose of deterring counterfeiters whose activities are destroying the public's confidence in the nation's currency. The Secret Service is now part of the Department of Homeland Security. The Secret Service was established as a bureau of the Treasury for the purposes of deterring counterfeiters whose activities are destroying the public's confidence in the nation's currency. See, the only way the currency means anything is with your confidence. Without it, it means exactly what it is. It is exactly what paper can wipe your ass with it. The Bureau of Engraving and Printing. The Bureau of Engraving and Printing's mission is to develop and produce United States currency notes trusted worldwide. The BEP prints billions of dollars referred to as Federal Reserve notes each year for delivery to the Federal Reserve System. The Federal Reserve operates as the nation's central bank and serves to ensure that adequate amounts of currency and coins are in circulation. This is the stuff that causes people to do all manner of things. This is the stuff that causes people to lose their minds. This causes you, me, this causes all of us to get up every morning with a purpose. This is what gets people to want to be entrepreneurs. This is what gets people to want to be business owners, entrepreneurs, all manner of jobs, all manner of labor. This is why everyone does it. For this. U.S. Currency Education Program. Currency facts. Federal Reserve notes are a blend of 25% linen and 75% cotton. Currency paper has tiny red and blue synthetic fibers of various lengths, evenly distributed throughout the paper. Federal Reserve notes are a blend of 25% linen and 75% cotton. Red and blue synthetic fibers of various lengths, evenly distributed throughout the paper. 25% linen, 75% cotton throughout the paper. Get it? We've accepted, and you still accept, lifelong labor for dough, cream, bread, notes, cake, cash, chips, guap, cheddar, chicken, fetty, fun, stacks, racks, M's, a yard, a sawbuck, thins, dubs, scratch, ducats, skrilla, funceroys, bank rolls, a stash, money, the bag, paper. And the wealthiest persons on earth are wealthy not because they labor to earn paper like you, but because they actually manufacture the paper that you and I value. The wealthiest persons on earth are wealthy not because they labor to earn paper. And not because they had paper in order, not because they labored and earned paper to make them wealthy. The wealthiest persons on earth are wealthy not because they labor to earn paper, but because they actually manufacture the paper that you and I value. You lying every time you say you making money. You lying every time you say you making money. You ain't making shit. Do the right thing.